of March 10th, a woman called her husband while he was driving alone through rural Oklahoma. She asked him one question, then she asked it again.
How are you feeling? Are you drinking the coffee from the thermos I packed?
Yes. Every morning. It's the only thing keeping me going.
4 days later, he was dead in his cab on the shoulder of I-40, with no weapon, no witness, and a death certificate that said natural causes. And that 4-minute phone call, recorded by a dashcam running silently in the background without anyone knowing, was going to put her in prison for the rest of her natural life. This is the story of how a crime designed to be completely invisible got taken apart piece by piece by a woman with $9,000 in savings, a private toxicologist in Dallas, and a question she refused to stop asking. Stay with me, because the moment Agent Hutchins pressed play on that dashcam audio, everything Sandra Mercer built over 14 months collapsed in 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Dale Mercer woke up at 4:30 every morning. Not because he had to, because after 17 years of long-haul trucking, his body had simply stopped knowing how to sleep past it. He would make coffee, pack his thermos, kiss his wife Sandra on the forehead, and be eastbound on I-40 out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma before the sun came up. He was 41 years old. He drove for Melton Truck Lines out of Tulsa, one of the largest flatbed carriers on the Oklahoma-Texas corridor. He had a daughter named Kayla in her second year at Oklahoma State. He had a younger sister named Diane who called him every Sunday without fail. He had a dog named Hank who waited by the front door every Thursday when Dale was due home from his weekly run. He was, by every account of everyone who knew him, a completely ordinary man living a completely ordinary life. Sandra Mercer knew that. She had spent 6 weeks counting on it. If you cannot walk away from a story once it has its hooks in you, you are in the right place. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next case is worse than this one, and you will want to be here when it drops. Now, back to Sandra. Sandra had been planning this for 3 months before she ever bought the poison. She did not walk into this impulsively. She did not act out of rage on a bad night. What Sandra did was methodical, patient, and cold. She researched, she planned, she sourced, she executed. And when Dale kissed her on the forehead every Monday morning and picked up that thermos, she smiled and told him to drive safe. The compound she chose was thallium acetate, a heavy metal poison once used commercially as rat poison and now restricted in the United States. Colorless, odorless, tasteless, soluble in water and in hot liquid. It does not announce itself in the body the way common poisons do. It mimics, it disguises itself as other things: fatigue, nerve pain, cardiac stress. Its symptoms appear gradually over days and weeks, the body deteriorating in ways that look, to an examiner not specifically looking for it, exactly like the natural decline of a middle-aged man with high blood pressure and a sedentary job. Thallium does not appear on a standard autopsy toxicology panel. Medical examiners typically screen for approximately 100 compounds: alcohol, common drugs, known poisons. Thallium is not on that list unless someone has a specific reason to request it.
Sandra knew this. She had spent 3 months making sure she knew this before she spent a single dollar. She sourced the compound through an industrial chemical supplier using a prepaid Visa card purchased with cash at a Walmart in Muskogee, 40 minutes from their house. She had it shipped to a P.O. box she opened under a variation of her maiden name in Wagoner County. She conducted all her research on a secondary device, a phone bought cash at a pawn shop in Catoosa, keeping it completely off any network she was connected to. She added it to Dale's travel thermos every Sunday night for 6 weeks. 2 cups of dark roast, exactly the way he liked it. 1 invisible compound he would never taste. She had thought of almost everything. Almost. On the morning of March 10th, eastbound on I-40, somewhere between Henrietta and Shakota, Dale's phone rang through the cab speakers. It was Sandra. She asked how he was feeling. He said tired, headache, feet had been burning for a week, felt like walking on hot coals, figured it was the new boots. She asked if he had been drinking the coffee from the thermos she packed. He said yes, every morning. It was the only thing keeping him going out there. She said good. She told him she loved him. The call ended. Agent Hutchins would later sit in an impound yard in Tulsa listening to that call and note something that would not leave her. Dale's voice in those 4 minutes carried no suspicion, no guardedness, just the tired, grateful voice of a man who missed his bed and trusted his wife completely. He told Sandra the coffee was the only thing keeping him going. He had no idea it was the thing that was killing him. Dale Mercer drove another 63 miles before his body gave out. His rig was found on the shoulder of I-40 just past the McIntosh County line at 9:22 a.m. by a passing motorist who noticed the truck had not moved in nearly 2 hours. Dale was unresponsive in the cab. He was pronounced dead at McAllister Regional Health Center at 11:07 a.m. The cause of death on the initial certificate, signed by the county medical examiner 11 days later, read, "Cardiac arrest, secondary to hypertensive cardiovascular disease." Dale Mercer was 41 years old with a history of managed high blood pressure and a job that kept him sedentary for 10 hours a day. The standard toxicology panel came back unremarkable. No red flags, no reason to look further. Case closed in 11 days. 11 days. That is how long it took to close the file on Dale Mercer. If that makes something inside you go cold, subscribe. Every week on this channel, someone ordinary fights alone to make it right. You need to be here for what is coming next. Sandra Mercer filed a life insurance claim within the week. OSBI Special Agent Carla Hutchins opened a full homicide investigation within 48 hours. Hutchins was 12 years into her career with a background in financial crimes. She understood immediately that an invisible poison case lives or dies on its paper trail. She started pulling threads. The prepaid Visa card used to purchase the Thallium had been bought at a Walmart in Muskogee. Surveillance footage from the store, requested within the retention window, showed a woman in sunglasses and a dark jacket buying the card on a Tuesday afternoon, paying cash, not looking at the cameras. Her vehicle's license plate was captured in the parking lot footage. The plate came back registered to Sandra Mercer. The P.O. box in Wagner County had been opened under the name S. Hartwell. Sandra's maiden name was Hartwell. The secondary device, the pawn shop phone Sandra had used for all her research, had connected to the Mercer home Wi-Fi network on 2 occasions. That connection existed in the router's retained data. The FBI Digital Forensics Unit pulled it. The device's purchase was traced to a cash transaction at a pawn shop in Catoosa. The store's camera had Sandra on tape. Every single layer she had built had a seam, and every seam had left a record. But none of it, not the purchase trail, not the surveillance footage, not the Wi-Fi logs, none of it was as powerful as what Agent Hutchins found when she drove to the Melton Truck Line's impound yard in Tulsa and opened the door of Dale's cab. Melton Truck Lines equips its entire fleet with Samsara CM3 Dashcam systems, dual-facing, forward road view and cab interior simultaneously, continuous audio recording. The unit in Dale's Kenworth T680 had been running from the moment he left the yard on March 7th until the truck was recovered on March 14th. It had been sitting in that impound yard for 14 months, untouched, because there had been no reason to look at it before Diane Mercer refused to accept a death certificate. Hutchins sat in a folding chair in that impound yard with a laptop and listened to 11 hours of cab audio across 4 days of Dale's final run. Radio, dispatch chatter, road noise, miles of ordinary. And then, 6:14 a.m., March 10th, Sandra's voice. Hutchins listened to the call once, then she played it again. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. A wife calling her husband on his morning run, asking how he was feeling, and then, twice, unprompted, in the middle of a routine check-in, asking specifically whether he had been drinking the coffee from the thermos she packed. Not whether he was eating, not whether he was sleeping. The coffee from the thermos she packed, twice. Dale said yes, every morning. It was the only thing keeping him going. She said good. In isolation, a caring question. In the context of 340 times the lethal threshold of thallium in his tissue, it was a woman checking on the progress of a murder she was actively committing. It was Sandra Mercer confirming her husband was consuming the poison she had put in the thermos she packed for him with her own hands every Sunday night for 6 weeks. Hutchins sat in that folding chair for a long moment after the second playthrough. Then she picked up her phone.
Sandra Mercer was arrested on May 22nd, 14 months after Dale's death. Taken from her home in Broken Arrow at 7:40 a.m. She did not resist. She asked to change her shoes. She was charged with first-degree murder, 2 counts of insurance fraud, and obtaining a controlled substance by deception. The trial lasted 9 days. The prosecution built its case on 5 pillars: the toxicology results, the thallium purchase trail, the surveillance footage, the Wi-Fi router logs, and the Dashcam audio. On day 6, the jury heard Sandra's voice fill that courtroom, asking about the coffee, saying good, the call ending. The defense argued contaminated toxicology, circumstantial evidence, an innocent phone call. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Kayla Mercer, Dale's daughter, 20 years old when she lost her father, 22 when she sat in that gallery and heard the verdict, did not speak to media afterward. She walked out of the courthouse with her Aunt Diane and did not look back. Sandra Mercer is currently serving life without the possibility of parole at Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma. She has not spoken publicly since her conviction. She sent no letter to Dale's family at sentencing. She has said nothing. The $1.2 million in insurance proceeds, largely spent in the 14 months between Dale's death and Sandra's arrest, became the subject of a civil recovery action. A portion was recovered. Sandra Mercer built a perfect crime around an invisible poison, a clean paper trail, and the assumption that nobody would look hard enough to find what she had done. She did not account for a dashcam that had been running the whole time. She did not account for tissue samples preserved in the ground. She did not account for a medical billing clerk from Broken Arrow with $9,000 and a feeling she refused to dismiss. And she did not account for the fact that ordinary men who drive ordinary roads and drink their coffee every morning leave behind people who loved them quietly and completely, and who will spend everything they have to make sure the truth does not stay buried. The dashcam was running. The router kept its logs. The tissue samples were waiting. Diane Mercer asked the question nobody else would ask. And Sandra Mercer, who planned for almost everything, never had an answer for that. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more cases like Dale's, more files closed too quickly, more Dianes who refuse to let their person disappear. We find those cases. We tell those stories. Every single week, right here. Subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what part of this hit you hardest. And share this with one person tonight, because the best thing you can do for people like Dale is make sure his story reaches someone who needed to hear it. We will see you in the next one.